Dr. Demartini, welcome to the Young, Wild, and Rich podcast. Super excited to have you on.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. Have a little bit of an interesting story in terms of how I came into your work as well, too. I thought I'd share. It was about September 2018, and I was interviewing a gentleman on my podcast. His name is Michael Ban, and I was asking him how to really get people to care about working out. And the one thing he said was, you need to value it. And if they don't value it, they're not going to do it. And then he went on to say, there's an amazing book. It's called The Values Factor. I've shared it with probably 1,000 people because he's trained tons of different people online. And after that call, I went and got the book on Audible. I listened to it for about 10 minutes and it just didn't sit with me. So I stopped listening to it. And about a year later, I heard an interview on YouTube, listened to that video on YouTube, was extremely inspired, started going through all of your content, got the actual book, read it on 2 plane flights for work. And about a month later, I was at your workshop. So it's interesting to see how, things can come into your life. And I've just been so inspired by it as well. So just thought I'd share that story with you as well, too.
Thank you. It's always inspiring to hear because you never know who is really reading the book and what impact it has sometimes. I mean, you get some feedback from people, but not everyone. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. So the podcast I have is specifically for a lot of the young people who listen to this, have a career. And this show, I really try and bring on millennials. You're actually probably the first non-millennial on the show, but there is a reason for that. And
cut myself in half, I am.
Exactly. And it's all about bringing on millennials who have found a career that really gives them purpose, passion, fulfillment, inspiration to go into work, to wake up excited every single day. And I think a lot of young people find it difficult to find that for themselves. So I thought we could at least dive into the first question, asking, if you were giving a talk to, let's say, some of the listeners today, and you could share some advice on helping someone who doesn't necessarily know what they want to do. There's so much information out there today with social media. They're trying to navigate the landscape and find that. What are some pieces of advice you would share with them?
Well, you probably anticipated this, but the first thing I would do is to look at what they spontaneously do, that they love doing, that is deeply meaningful to them on a daily basis or nearly daily basis, and do what I call the value determination process to look at what their real hierarchy of values is. Look at what's really, truly most important to them. Because everybody has a set of priorities that they live their life by. And whatever's highest on that list of priorities, highest on that value list, thing that's most important in their life, they spontaneously do. They don't have to be extrinsically motivated to do. They just love to do it intrinsically. And that's the area where they're going to excel. That's the area where they're going to have that tap dancing to work, as Buffett says, where they can't wait to get up in the morning and be of service, so people can't wait to get up that service. So I would go in there and first do what I call the value determination process. I have it on my website. It's complimentary. It's free for people. That's drdemartini.com. And what it is 13 questions to help you identify as objectively as we can make it, what exactly is really important to you. I've asked thousands of people, how many of you want to be financially independent? Every hand goes up. And I said, how many of you are financially independent? And most hands go down, unless I'm in a corporate program with executives. And then I show them that even though they have the fantasy of being financially independent, their actual values that they live by is making them buy consumables that depreciate in value and actually erode their potential for wealth building because they really don't have a value on buying long-term assets. And they may not even know what it is. They don't have enough value to even study it, learn about it, and apply it. So many people don't know what they value. They think they do. And so going in objectively evaluating that and narrowing that down is really an important step. Because then once you identify it, you can start structuring your life according to priority and plan it. There's 20 universities in Japan that are utilizing my value determination process for guidance counseling for students going to school and then going on to careers. And they found it enormously beneficial because a lot of people were sitting there saying, I don't know, but their life was demonstrating the direction. I look at how people fill their space, how they spend their time, what energizes them. What is it that they spend their money on? What is it they have most order and organization around? Where do they are most disciplined, reliable, and focused? What do they think about, visualize, and internally dialogue with themselves about most, about how they want their life that shows evidence of coming true? What is it that they love conversing with other people about and keep bringing conversation to? What is it that inspires them and brings a tear to their eye? What is it they keep pursuing that is a goal that is coming true? And then what is it that they love studying about, reading about spontaneously? They can't wait to learn. And by going through those value determinations, those 13, and answer 3 answers each, and maybe looking at it again a week later or a month later and to get really objective about it, and then structuring your life according to what was showing up on the highest value is where you're going to excel. We've proven it. We've demonstrated it. I've been doing it for 41 years. It's amazing what it does. And a person never goes to work for the sake of a job. They go to work to fulfill what they value most. And if they can see how the job description and the mission, primary objectives, and vision of the company is helping them fulfill their highest values, they're engaged, they're productive, they're inspired at work. It's nothing to do with the job. It's the perception and how well they see it linked and congruent with what they value most. So that's the first place I'd start, is identifying what they really, really, really value. Not their fantasies, not the injected and inculcated values that they get from conforming to people around them, not the shoulds of their parents, not those things, but what is it that they really love and spontaneously do? And when they find that and they structure their life with priority in a way that serves ever greater numbers of people and master the skill of delegating all lower priority things, they're on the path of an inspired life.
It's funny you were ending with how it's not the job that you go to in the specific function of that job. It's what that job actually gives you in the form of your values. Because I know for some of the people who are listening into this podcast right now, they're going, well, yeah, okay, I can figure out my values, but I don't see how playing basketball or, doing this fun thing I like to do, like watching sports, is going to be able to make me an income. But what you were saying, and I'm sure you have a few things about that as well, too. It's not just about, when I went through the value determination exercise, I had an idea of what was most valuable to me, and that ended up being what was very valuable to me. But that specific highest value still was connected to my job, and I was feeding that specifically from my job, from the things that I do outside of my job, like with this podcast. And I'll share my highest value, and this is at least just how I define it, is a personal performance. So anything that I can do to perform at my highest level, from eating right, fitness, education, reading, learning, and sharing that information with other people, I see that not only in what I do with my podcast, but also what I do in my job, in my day-to-day. So being able to go a little bit deeper, and maybe you can build a little bit off that in terms of that person who's saying, how does that fit into my career?
Many people say, I'm not asking what they like.
Mm-hmm.
See, people write down fantasies. I've been doing this 41 years. 90% of the people, if not more, write down fantasies. They write down what they think it should be, ought to be, supposed to be, got to be, have to be, must, or what they fantasize it will be pleasurable based on iconic people that they infatuate with. That's not what I'm asking for. If it was really basketball, they would be on track to be working towards a basketball career. They would be making that happen. Because the people I've met that are actually super basketball players, they're focused on basketball. I had a lady that's a pole vaulter, 2-time gold medalist in my program Breakthrough in Melbourne, Australia, and we went through her value determination. It was pole vaulting, pole vaulting, pole vaulting, pole vaulting, pole vaulting down. And she had her coach there. And the coach said she lives 5 to 7 hours, sometimes 8 hours a day doing pole vaulting. So there's people put fantasies down, just like they put fantasies they want to be financially independent. But 99% of the people never do that. I'm not interested in fantasies. I'm not interested in what they like. I'm interested in what their life demonstrates they spontaneously do. And that's different. And making that distinction is very important in a career path, because if you're going to work and you're not inspired by what you do, you're going to burn out. You're going to go into your lower values as a compensation for the unfulfillment, which is going to create your amygdala desire center, and you're going to look for immediate gratification to compensate for the unfulfillment. And you'll be more addictive and debaucherous in your pursuits, instead of focused and more philanthropic in your pursuits.
I was also thinking in terms of, if someone was thinking about, again, what your life demonstrates, maybe there's someone who plays, fantasy sports, and they spend, 5 or 6 hours a day. They really love doing that. And then they go to their job to make money, and they're, let's say, not as fulfilled there. And then making that connection to see how that job can help them fulfill that thing that they really do enjoy, I think is really important. And I know you have a specific exercise in terms of taking what your vocation is or your career and linking that to your highest values. And maybe you can explain a little bit about that, especially if someone's trying to find, that.
Well, if you're not congruent and aligned in your daily actions and in your priorities to what you value most, you're going to break down.
Mm-hmm.
Your physiology is going to let it, with symptoms, because that's what symptoms are, feedback mechanisms. And the symptoms are not going to be just physiological. They could be in any area, financial, business. So if you're pursuing something that's really, truly congruent, you will be inspired to go to work. But if you have a job and you have a high value on financial security, and you're doing a job because it's bringing you financial security, then you're not going to that job for the job. You're going there because it's the most financial secure system you've so far seen or planned. And if you don't come up with a plan of making the great money that you would like, that's comparable or more, doing what you love, you'll stay in that job because financial security is high in your values. Mm-hmm. You don't realize that that's really what you're there for. And you look at all the other things, you go, that's the best financial source I've got right now. So, but if you love video games, my son's a video game person, right? He's got thousands of followers. So in the process of doing that, he's designing his life so he can do video games. And he's prioritized it, and he's doing it, and he's putting out videos, 500, 600 videos out there, and he's out there making a living doing videos. So there's no high value that can't be turned into cash. I've been doing this a long time. I've not seen anybody that can't do what they love and get handsomely paid for it. If you ask yourself, what is it I would absolutely love to do? How do I get handsomely and beautifully paid to do it? What are the 7 highest priority action steps I can do today? And each day, they can help me move one step closer to that realization. What obstacles might I run into, and how do I mitigate them and solve them in advance? What worked and what didn't work today? How do I do it more effectively and efficiently tomorrow? And how did, no matter what happened today, how did it get me one step closer to this objective? You'll move in that direction. But if for some reason you're in a job and you haven't taken the time to see how that job is helping you fulfill what is deeply meaningful, transiently, and I'm going to say it temporarily, until you either go and create your own job, your own business plan and your own career as an entrepreneur, or until you go and get a different job that's more congruent. If you're in that job for financial security, the wisest thing to do is to make a list of that job description and go and do the value determinations a few times to make sure you're solid and certain about what's really valuable to the top 3 values. And then go and ask, how specifically is doing this job duty temporarily until I either create my own company or get a new job? How specifically is doing this temporarily going to help me fulfill those top 3 values? And answer that, not one time, 10, 20, or 30 times, until your brain neuroplastically has remodeled the pathway and sees that this is on the way, not in the way. And then go down that list. It may take you 3 hours. It takes about 3 hours. But those 3 hours will be the most valuable thing, because your energy will go up, your creativity will go up, your engagement will go up, your inspiration to go to do that work temporarily until you're ready to do the next step. And it'll buy you time to create a master plan, a business plan about what you want. But if you never take the time to design what you want, you're going to be living by other people's wants. Any area of your life you don't empower, other people are going to overpower you. And so people who don't make plans and become entrepreneurs will be working for somebody else being told what to do. And people working for other people pay the most taxes and have the least probabilities of financial independence than people who are entrepreneurs that have more write-offs and invest the difference and allow, capital gains and dividends to make the money in the lower tax bracket.
Yeah, and I can attest to those exercises as well, too. It's great to know what your highest values are, but then going through the process of linking different things that you're not too certain about and creating all of those benefits. And again, anything good takes work. And if you can sit down and you can write and write and write and write, your brain starts to see so many different opportunities with what you're doing as you're building this career as a young professional.
For many years, I have taken companies that had perceived that their workforce was in low engagement levels, according to the standards and skilling systems that they use to measure it. And I would go in and I would take those individuals, sometimes 200 or 300 people at a time, and have them bring their job description. And then we would do their value determination and we would nail it. And then we do the linking for 3 hours, 3 or 4 hours. And the productivity of that group and the fulfillment and gratitude of the people working in that company skyrocketed. And it's quite amazing. I mean, we have one company that's one of the largest companies in Japan claim that in 1 year, their company went up $1.47 billion because of that implementation. So I've seen this happen, and I've seen it 41 years. So I know that it can work. I mean, there's no question in my mind. But it's the quality of your life based on the quality of the questions you ask. And if you ask questions that allow you to see how whatever's happening in your life, perceptually or actively, is helping you fulfill what you value. Your life's fulfillment level goes up. And it's never the world outside you. We have control over our perceptions, decisions, and actions in life. And a master is the one that knows how to utilize those three things to their fullest. And asking quality questions, how specifically is what I'm perceiving or what I'm doing helping me fulfill what is most deeply meaningful to me, is what increases the probability of having a deeply meaningful and inspired and fulfilling life. And it's that simple. Either go and do what you love and delegate the rest, or love what you do by linking it. But don't go through life and not do one of those two things, or you're missing out on the magnificence of your life.
I'm just hearing that again too. I'm inspired to do this with, the people I work with at my company. Because again, I work for an organization, and just being able to see how exercises that you can do for yourself, and you see that transformation, you want to share that with people. So that's definitely a takeaway for me to do that with the people I work with, at least in my department, because of, again, how trivial it is.
I have a screening process. I was asked by a company in South Africa, a holding company that had 17 subsidiaries in it, primarily in the mining industry. And I had 17 CEOs in the company. Now, the company did not give me any information about these CEOs, other than he said, the head of the set point said, we want you to go in and determine the degree of congruency and the productivity of these individuals by your screening mechanisms. So I had the morning with them, and we identified, we had their job description. We identified their values. And I went through one by one with those individuals. Well, we did it in a group, but I still checked it one by one and looked at the degree of engagement. There was one individual that was so off the chart, or let me rephrase that, under the chart, that its degree of engagement was 17%. That means that a small percentage of what they were doing was meaningful to them. Some were over 7. Most of them were 70 or above. So that's pretty good engagement. But this one was 17. And when I got that, I was amazed. And I went to the head of them at lunch. During the lunch period, I went to them and I said, this individual, the magnitude of linking required to get this person engaged is very high. I can't imagine this person being highly productive in here. And they started chuckling. And they said, we were curious if you would pick this out, because we were about to let this gentleman go. We have another gentleman we're going to replace him with. And we were wondering if you could pick that out with your method. We were testing the method. And I said, well, right now, this guy's disengaged and he's going to cost you. And he said, well, he is. And here's the stats. And they showed them to me. And I said, he's got about a 17% engagement level. And I said, you look at the stats compared to the other CEOs, it was reflecting that. And I said, now what we're going to do is we're going to spend the afternoon, or now we're going to go in and engage them, and we're going to measure what happens before and after. And you can measure it on a week, a month, a quarter, and each quarter for the next year. And then let's get together again. And they had their own measuring systems. And we just spent 4 hours engaging these individuals and training them on how to keep engaged throughout their year. And it was quite astonishing what could be done. And these are people, except for the one, I didn't waste my time on that one. I said, he's going to, so we're just going to let him go. I suggested he actually leave. And we did that. And these guys really increased their performance. And that, to the company, for 17 companies, which are in the mining company, these are big companies, that's a significant return on investment for one day effort.
Yeah, no, that's extremely interesting. And being able to take a step back and take that time can just create so many different things a company can do over the next year. And again, you've worked with so many different organizations on doing things like this. And I'm curious, not only being an entrepreneur yourself, running a company, employing different young professionals as well too, individuals who are looking to, find that career for themselves. Because again, today, young people are trying to build different skill sets. They're trying to continue to build that career capital. Have you seen any specific skills that a young person could focus on that might separate themselves, make them more indispensable, add more value to the company they work for, just being around such a diverse group of people?
I don't know if I can say that there's just this is the set of skills, because each company and each job description is a little different, other than engagement and overall engagement. Right. It was Peter Lynch in the 90s who wrote a book, One Up on Wall Street, who was at the time with Fidelity and was a pretty good money manager, and he'd get good returns consistently. And people asked him, what was the secret of you deciding what to put your investments into? And he said, before I do it, I do my technical analysis and I do my functional analysis and stuff to try to identify these companies. And then once I narrowed them down, I would actually fly to the location and I looked for four things at the company. I looked for one, were they inspired by the vision? Are they grateful to work there? Do they love what they're doing? And are they enthusiastically working? Is it buzzing? If I don't see those four things, I don't invest.
Interesting.
So that was a human behavioral component of his investment strategy. Just like if you go right now in a mall, most likely there'll be an Apple store there if it's a big mall. And if you go to an Apple store and you look at any other store, most of the stores in Apple's are pretty full. It's buzzing, it's enthused, there's talking, there's energy and everything else. You can see that. And that's why Apple's done as well as it's done, because it's meeting people's needs, it's doing it in an efficient manner, and people are inspired by it and they get a good commission and everybody's working. So yeah, there are certain traits of engagement that I would look for, but the actual job will determine what that skill is. You might have a very strong introvert that's sitting there doing detail work on a computer all day that doesn't talk to people. And for them, that's what's needed. And they're engaged in that. And then other times you got an outspoken person that's gabbing because they're a salesperson or whatever. So I don't want to say, I really believe that there's a place for every type of personal expression. But, and there's a place, because I found people that sometimes when we do their value determination, find out what it is, they're misplaced in their job. We reallocate the job and they excel. We take out certain job components and we put in new job components, and then they excel. And their levels of enthusiasm and gratitude go way up. So knowing what the values are is a crucial component. So that would be more of the thing I would look for, and the normal engagement measurements that you're looking at. Because I can't say that I know very, very highly achieving individuals with all different types of personalities, but they match what is enthusiastic for them. I knew a guy that made $24 million a year. He sat in his underwear, played guitar most of the day, and did search engine searches to find out what most people are looking for in the search engines, had a form letter that he then wrote up, modified it to match that search, looked online for the people who were providing the greatest service and had the best track record of providing the service needed to fulfill those search, had a form letter going to them, offering to drive traffic to them at a 15% return, finding out what their client acquisition cost and matching it or below, and then putting out the form letter. And I watched him in 45 minutes from scratch, completely from scratch, search out a need, find the people that provided the solution, modify the letter, send them both out. In 45 minutes, I saw money clicking into his account.
Wow. I mean, that's a fantastic story, to your point too, on I've never seen someone be able to not turn their highest value into cash. So that's a perfect point.
And he played guitar for a couple hours, then he'd go and look on another search engine. But he's making $24 million a year. So that's a guy that's not, I mean, I'm different. I love standing in front of audiences and, having terrible jokes and things like that and, presenting. But there's different needs for different niches, and matching that niche is value driven.
I think that simplifies it too for the audience, because I think so many young people are trying to figure out, like, what skills should I build? You come back to your values, you align with those. And I was going to ask you a question about finding an employer, but you answered that as well with what you look at in companies. I think those are great things to look at right out the gate. Are people engaged in their work? Is it exciting? Some of those other things you were sharing there too. Well,
I differentiate excitement from enthusiasm. There's a difference. Many people confuse, just like they confuse infatuation with love, they confuse excitement with enthusiasm. Their excitement is a kind of a manic moment where you're kind of high, and usually blinded to the downsides and vulnerable. Enthusiasm is a poised, present state. It meant entheos, the God within, and the divine within was an equanimity state, a state of poised presence, and it's a centered integrity state. And most people think that excitement is enthusiasm, and they don't distinction. But true enthusiasm is not a super high five kind of stuff. It's a really engaged, present, enthusiastic, forgetting hour. When you've been engaged in something, I'm sure you can see it in your eyes. When you're engaged in something, you don't know what time it is. You work till 2 a.m. You don't think about it. And you're not sitting going rah-rah. You're just focused and present. And I think that's a sign of engagement. You're totally engaged. Like a person that's watching an amazing movie is totally engaged. They're not moving.
They're not yelling.
They're not excited. They're engaged. And that's the difference if they're enthused by it. And I think that people deserve to do it. And I've yet to find somebody that I've consulted with, I've yet to find them, that I can't help them narrow that down and find out what it is and help them on that path. I've not seen somebody that can't be done. But many people have constraints of fitting in. One of the biggest challenges people face is the conformity constraint. I've got to fit in. I can't do this because my mother wants me to do this and my dad's paid for this and I've now been going into school for this and I've done this. And they've just suppressed what's deeply meaningful to them. I mean, can I share a story? I don't know if it's the time for it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to share a real story here. I was doing the breakthrough experience many years ago in Houston, Texas. And a gentleman came there that had just had a heart attack. He was in his 50s. And he was very stressed and suicidal. So he not only had a heart attack, but he was really suicidal and depressed. His wife just left him and took the kids. He just went through a bankruptcy. He had a heart attack.
Jeez.
He had no money, and he was overweight. And the wife took the kids, so he didn't have his kids. And he just had his father die just weeks earlier.
Wow.
So he was really in a low moment. And I sat with him until 2 a.m, because breakthrough usually goes around midnight, but I stayed with him until 2 because I didn't want this guy to not really break through. And I said, this is the greatest day of your life. Because after asking him questions, I figured out what was going on. And he says, what? He goes, what do you mean the greatest day of my life? And he was rattling off as victim of history instead of mastery of destiny, what was not working, what was in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, and excuse the expression, and this may offend somebody, but I'm going to say it anyway. I said, you got out of a marriage you didn't really want to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked at me and goes, well, that's true. And you got out of a job you didn't really want to be in. Mm-hmm. He paused and he just stared at me. He goes, that's I said, you have been trying to please your dad and fit into your dad and satisfy your dad's expectations. He's the one that wanted you to be a lawyer, didn't it? He goes, yes. And he's the one that wanted you to marry, and your mom wanted you to marry that woman, didn't you? I said, yeah, it's a Jewish family. And I said, and you just now got out of that marriage and you have no payments to do. You wouldn't pay. He started chuckling. He goes, that's true. He says, so you don't have any alimony or child support or anything like that because you're bankrupt. So now you can pay what you really want because you love your kids if you go back into business. Not because you have to, but because you really care about your kids. You want to pay what you want, which may be at any amount that you can, or to give them the life you want. He said, I like this. I said, what do you really want to do? And he looked at me and he goes, wow, that's an interesting question. What I really want to do is, I've loved cars all my life, and I've loved classic cars. I'd love to open up a classic car company and sell and trade classic cars. That's been my fantasy and dream or whatever for years. I said, so what would happen if you did it? You got nothing stopping you now. Nothing stopping you. You can start trading cars. Doesn't take a lot of money to start trading cars and get cuts out of it. He got so inspired at 2:00 in the morning, he ended up going and moving out to Miami, where it was warm, not up in the cold where he came from. He ended up starting his business by trading cars, first of all, and developing his network. In 4 months, he was actually cash flow moving forward. Instead of going and staying in the bankrupt, he decided to pay off his own thing, but for his own consciousness, slowly but surely. It was about a 5-year project. But he changed his life, met up another woman that was a little younger, who was more enthused, if you will, and more present with him. And he didn't have his father on his back anymore, because his father's passed away. Mm-hmm. And he started to be authentic.
Wow.
And he lost weight. He got into exercise, turned his cardiovascular system back into order, was no longer depressed, got authentic with his life, started living by priority because I trained him on that, delegating everything he could as he started to accumulate a little bit of cash flow. Because once he's started having some cash flow, he delegated anything that wasn't inspiring to him and let all the paperwork and administrative and stuff off his back so he could go out there and do deals. And when he focused on nothing but deals, the deals started happening. Mm-hmm. And he's a different guy today. So it's so crucial to not let your life go by, because it goes by quick.
Yeah.
I'm 65 and it's like that. So it's not wise to not do something that inspires you and not be engaged in life. Because it's going to let you, your body's going to let you know it. Your bank account's going to let you know it. Money without meaning leads to debauchery because of amygdala desire centers rule you. But money with meaning leads to philanthropy, as I said earlier. And being philanthropic and doing something that makes a difference that serves people is more fulfilling than immediate gratification through debauchery.
That's a fantastic story. And I'm glad you shared that, because I think a lot of young people face that specific challenge today. And I'm not saying anything drastic needs to happen before something can change in your life. And maybe you can speak to that a little bit too, because I think a lot of young people are trying to please their parents. They're going to a school to get a degree. They're not even necessarily inspired to go to school. I mean, that's a big conversation I talk with a lot of young people about today is, would you recommend someone to go into college? It's 50-50. Some people say yes, some people say no. It depends on, again, what you value, what you want to do with your life. But a lot of young people fall into that trap of trying to please their parents. If someone is in that specific situation where they're not living their life for themselves, but they're either living it to please their parents or someone else in their life, how would you talk to them about kind of moving from that direction?
Well, I deal with that quite a bit. So I recommend this: to first do the value determination, to deeply contemplate and meditate on all of the job or career paths you can either create or follow that align with that, and narrow it down. You know, there's just so many ones you're going to do. You can rule out a lot of them, but you want to narrow it down. Then you ask yourself this question, because I'm not against education. I can't guarantee that most education is geared towards entrepreneurship. Most of it is for drones. But, you know, because I've yet to see anybody go to school in any high school or even college and learn how to be entrepreneurs or learn how to become, you know, billionaires or anything. They don't teach that. Teach you how to fit in. So if you identify what it is, if you're really clear on your entrepreneurial path, there's no harm in taking classes that are geared towards that if you were to extract those out, or go to external sources of education, entrepreneurial education for those objectives, or take the classes you're taking and ask, how specifically is taking these classes going to help me in that area? So I'm gonna give another story if I can.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm speaking at St. Stithian's School in Johannesburg, South Africa. 400 students there. They're all high school. And these are young boys, young men that are 16, 17, basically, 18, 15. And the headmaster said, I got a case for you, Dr. Demartini. I'd like you to sit down with this gentleman. He's thinking about dropping out of school. And he wants to go climb Mount Everest, and he wants to go hike. But we're concerned that he's not really prepared for it. I think he has a fantasy, and we don't want him to lose school over a fantasy and then feel he's left out and drop out and lose momentum. Can you chat with him? I said, okay. So I sat with the guy, and I said, so I was been told by the headmaster you're intending to plan to go to Mount Everest. He said, yeah. And I said, I've been to the base camp. I haven't been to the top, but I've been to Tibet and Nepal, and I've been to those areas. So it's pretty high up there. What have you done towards acclimatization? What's your preparation for that? Well, I've been climbing. I did climb Mount Kilimanjaro and I think like that. But if you're about to go, what's your steps? What's your strategy? He didn't have a really thorough strategy. And I said, do you speak Nepalese or do you speak Tibetan language? And he goes, no. I said, so if you're going to be taking Sherpas up there, how are you going to communicate with them? And he goes, or do you have a Sherpa already that speaks perfect English? He goes, no, I don't. I said, so you're going to go there without having the languages and the communication skills. That could be challenging if you don't know the people, because if you don't speak in the thing, it's not as easily to trust people. And he goes, I said, do you have your language teacher at the school helping you on that journey to make sure you have everything working towards the achievement of this goal? He goes, no. He says, maybe you might want to go to your language teacher and make sure that they're helping you in this and study that language a bit. He goes, oh, okay. And I said, in your studies of chemistry, what have you done in chemistry to prepare for the altitude adaptation? And have you studied erythropoietin, and have you basically studied the adaptation rates and how many blood cells you'll need and red blood cells? And are you monitoring that at different altitudes? And he goes, no, should I? And I said, well, if you go up there and ascend too fast, you'll get a major headache and you'll then lose your energy. And you might only walk 6 feet at a time and then stop. I've been at 19, 20,000 feet, and you walk 6 feet, you take a break if you're not acclimatized. You got to acclimatize for it. So what is your plan on that? And what if you studied the chemistries and prepared for the partial oxygen measurements and things and your cardiovascular response? He goes, no, I haven't. I said, you've not asked your chemistry teacher to help you get to Mount Everest? He goes, no. I said, well, you might want to go and prepare for that because it sounds like you're not quite prepared for this objective. And also, do you know everything about, the sociology of these two cultures? Because you're right at the border of Nepal and Tibet. Are you studying the sociology to make sure you don't offend any Sherpas in your conversation? He goes, should I be worried about that? Well, you don't want to be abandoned on the top of a mountain on the way to Mount Everest. You want to make sure you're communicating with them with the language and respect because they have a different culture. And have you studied Buddhism or Tibetan Bon faith? And he goes, no. Well, you have a school here that might teach you some things on theology, and you might have a person here that teach you sociology to study the culture. You might consider sticking around. I think you got another year or so and a year and a half to go to school here. And he goes, yeah. Have you considered maybe making sure that they're all working as a team and practice working as a team and prepare and get this thing done? So you go there and you absolutely guarantee you're going to get the result. And then you have a success, and then you could become very known for your accomplishment and use your team to get you there. Anyway, within 50 minutes, we had him engaged and focused and back in school and using his teachers to go to Nepal to go and climb Mount Everest. And when they found out that he was asking them and engaging them, he had a team of about 9 different people, including the headmaster and his parents, doing everything they could. Instead of now not supporting him, they're now helping him get his goal. And he was starting to save his money because he had no idea what it's really going to cost.
Right.
He had no idea. I mean, when I started going through the financial aspect of it, he goes, crap, I'm just going to go backpacking to Mount Everest, right? And he started realizing what's going to cost to pay the Sherpas, to pay there's fees and stuff to even get into those areas. And I said, you're not prepared. So let's get grounded. Let's get this goal. We want that goal. I want you to be one of the people that make it to the top of Mount Everest. Let's ground this. Now he's enthused and inspired about finishing school. He sees it on the way, not in the way, because I made the links.
Mm-hmm.
So I would take people, no matter what their job that they want to do, if there are classes that can help that, or if they're not clear, I would take the classes they're taking and ask what you do know, how are these classes going to get you there? So you have the advantage of an education, because there is a discipline from education that's a value. But if you know the education you're going to go into, then link it and go in that direction. I got one more story. I had a 14-year-old boy that came to me in Brisbane, Australia, with his father. Well, the father brought him. And if the father comes up to me after I do a presentation on learning, and he hands me 3 letters from 3 schools that rejected his son. And the father is just frustrated. He's a single parent. The wife left him with the son, and he's trying his best to try to get this son to do well in school and everything else. And I saw the things. He said his son is not motivated, unwilling to do the work, preoccupied with other things, and just not engaged. And they just didn't want him in the school. So I turned to the kid and I said, all right, what is it that you love doing? He says, I love cars. I said, in your room, do you fill your space with car things? The father said, that's all he's got in his room. He's got posters, he's got cars, he's got models, he's got magazines, he's got model cars, he's got pictures of poster cars. I said, do you spend your time focusing on cars? Cars. What energizes you most? Anything to do with cars. Where do you get money? What do you buy? Car stuff. What is it you're disciplined in? Anything to do with cars. What are you focused on? What is it you're most organized in? All my cars and all my materials are all organized. I went down the value determination, and it was cars. Now, when I see that clarity, and it's absolutely certain, I told the father, I said, stop the school pursuit. Mm-hmm. I want you right now at 14 years old, take him to a car dealership and tell him what his highest value is. And by the way, I asked the kid, tell me about cars. Tell me about the cars. The guy just rattled off stuff about cars. I mean, he was a photographic memory. He had no problem in learning. He just had a focused value system. I told the father to take him to a very high-end, the top car dealership, the wealthy cars, because this guy was into Maseratis, Ferraris, this kind of stuff. Not necessarily Rolls and Bentleys, but, the faster cars. I said, take him to that place, see if you can't get a legal document to sign it where he can go and sweep and do anything in that car dealership. And I'll guarantee you by 21, he'll be a multimillionaire and own a car dealership. By the time he was 17, he was making $200,000 a year.
Wow.
because he found his niche.
Hmm.
When I said that to his father was kind of shocked. The guy jumped up to me and put his arms around me. And he was literally teary-eyed. And he said, somebody finally understands me.
Wow.
And when the father saw that, the father hugged him. And he looked at me and he hugged me and he said, I got it. I understand now. Thank you. I've never seen my son like this. 17, 200,000.
Amazing. And again, these stories, and I appreciate you sharing that. I've never heard you share that story specifically. I've heard maybe one of the three, but it really helps crystallize and internalize the power of this specific exercise. I know we're coming up on the time here, and I was going to ask you questions about New Year's resolutions and things like that. But again, I think the biggest takeaway for my audience is to go through this process, because just understanding your values and then being able to link those and finding something, just like the stories, really helps people understand that. So thank you for sharing that as well too.
Yeah, by the way, because he was young and because he was on the internet a lot, the car dealership was an older guy and wasn't as savvy on the internet.
Mm.
And his expertise started selling cars and trading cars on the internet. That's where he made all his money.
Wow.
And this guy was doing the old thing, the car, come into the car, take a look at the car. This guy was trading the friggin' cars as a 16-year-old, trading cars online.
Again, another perfect example too. You can turn anything you love into cash. I mean, 17 years old, $200,000. I mean,
yeah,
there's not many.
I am absolutely certain that if you get somebody who's really inspired by engaged, they will see genius, creativity, innovation, and original thinking emerges spontaneously when you pursue challenges that inspire you. Mm-hmm. So finding a problem that people are trying to solve and finding the one that you love solving and pursuing that is what wakes up innovation. Mm-hmm. And so this kid was doing what he loved. He loved solving problems. People wanted a car. He wanted to find it where it is. I'll locate it. I'll get that car. He'll do it. Now, he wasn't legally old enough to do those things, so he had to use another person initially to do the trades, but the guy would then pay him. Mm-hmm. And this is not even the way it's supposed to be done, but this is how it was working.
Sure.
But the reality is that he was so engaged and so enthused and so knowledgeable about the cars, he blew those car dealerships out of the water. Right. But I knew he would, because I could tell by the way he just rattled off the freaking engines. He knew everything about the car. I said, most car dealers do not even know that information. Just go and take him to car and do it. I have no doubt this kid, I haven't seen him in a few years, but I guarantee that kid's going to be going places because of it, because he's now clear. And people, they've got to give themselves permission to be authentic. The magnificence of who you are is far greater than any fantasies or subordinations you'll ever impose on yourself.
I love that. Seriously, such a powerful story, and no better way to internalize that for someone listening to this than a real world example. And I know we're just about at our time. I definitely wanted to give you time to, if you had any other last parting words. It's early in the new year. People are listening in. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
You mentioned about New Year's resolutions. Don't waste your time on them, I say. If you're not doing what you love doing, coming in and having an overeating and overspending period for a couple weeks, creating a temporary void, makes you think, well, I need to now go on a diet and start saving money or something like that. That's a transient little value void kind of game. That's going to peter out in 2-3 weeks because you get back in your routine and you're not doing that. So don't waste your time on goals that aren't truly certain and inspiring, and know the difference between a fantasy and a real objective. A fantasy is something that has got a positive without a negative, and an objective has a balance of both. And if you're not willing to embrace both, it's not really important to you. That's a very important distinction, because people pursue fantasies, and then when the challenges come, they want to give up on them because they're not willing to embrace the things that do it. I ask people, would you like to be a billionaire or a centimillionaire or a decamillionaire or something like that? And they go, oh, yeah. I said, have you done research on the lives of those people? Well, no, and all they think of is the positive side. They don't think of the challenges that it took and the challenges that they face. If you're a centimillionaire or a billionaire, you have the challenges of managing your children and family who are entitled and spoiled sometimes if you don't make them go to work for minimum wage and work their way up, Mm-hmm. So you now have new challenges. If you're not willing to embrace the challenges that go with the goals or the objectives, you're not really willing to do what it takes to get there. And you have to know the distinction between a fantasy of just all the positives and the real objective that it takes to do it. Because if you're willing to handle that, that's a sign that you're in your highest values. Because when you're in your highest values, your executive center's on, you're planning things with foresight, you embrace pain and pleasure in the pursuit of it, and you don't stop. You see things on the way, never on the way. You see things as feedback, not steps in the way, stopping points.
Mm-hmm.
So don't waste your time on goals that aren't truly meaningful, and give yourself permission to do something extraordinary, because the true you is extraordinary.
We definitely conclude there, because I think that is so powerful. I mean, one of the biggest things that I took away from, being able to actually see you in person is being able to see fantasies, infatuations, being able to understand when you're only seeing one side of something. That's so powerful. So that's great advice, especially when people are setting goals, because again, a lot of goal setting, I think, becomes fantasies. The last thing I'll ask you too is, where's the best place, our audience, a lot of young professionals, to start with you? I know you have an exercise on your website. I've recommended the book to plenty of people. I have 2-3 copies just sitting on my in my library too, and I try to give it out to as many people as possible. Where would be the best place to start for a young professional to get some of your material?
The easiest place, just go to my website, drdemartini.com. Demartini is DEMARTINI.com. And on there, in that website, you could probably go and navigate and, browse on there for hours. I mean, there's thousands of radio, television, newspaper, magazines, podcasts, thousands. You could do that. There's online videos you could spend the rest of your life doing. So it's an educational website. And if you were wanting to learn, just start digging and look at all the different articles and topics. And because I've been doing it a long time, 47 years. So.
And you have plenty of great interviews on YouTube as well.
There's lots of interviews. This week in Turkey, we're at 41 interviews in the last week in just Turkey alone. I'm about to go to Istanbul tomorrow. So
wow.
We're over major networks there. So we're just that one is 40.
Well, Dr. Demartini, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I'm extremely excited to get this out to our listeners. And I know even if it impacts 1, 5, 10, 20, 100 lives, that's all part of your mission. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to do it. And whoever's out there, give yourself permission to be the magnificent you.